Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the invisible strings of influence that are quite literally woven all around us. Just think about your daily life for a second. You've got advertisements everywhere, political speeches, even just casual chats with a salesperson or a coworker. But what if I told you that in a lot of these interactions, there's actually a hidden playbook being used to secretly guide your choices? Well, today, let's unpack exactly how that works.
Have you ever found yourself saying yes to something, like a purchase, favor, or even a new belief, without entirely knowing why you agreed to it in the first place? It's a kind of unsettling feeling, right? Well, that is exactly what we're focusing on today. We're going to look at the hidden tactics used to bypass your critical thinking, and we'll trace this all the way from modern psychological manipulation right back to classical political philosophy.
All right, so here is our roadmap for today. 1. The spectrum of influence. 2. The mind control process. 3. Hypnotic language patterns. 4. The roots of Machiavellianism. And 5. Recognizing the puppet strengths. Kicking things off with Section 1. The spectrum of influence.
So, influence itself, it's not inherently evil. Actually, in our source material, Paul and Denna's work on dark psychology, he points out something pretty fascinating. Real mind control doesn't involve any sort of magical, mystical arts. It's actually the bedrock of a very common modern practice: marketing. Yep, the ultimate goal of basic marketing is really just doing the thinking for the target, basically taking the offensive to get the brain to that magic word, yes.
So, how do we actually draw the line between good persuasion and bad manipulation? Well, it exists on a continuum. On one end, you've got ethical influence, right? This improves the individual, respects human rights, all that good stuff. But on the dark end, you have destructive manipulation that literally strips away a person's independence and identity. And Anna uses this brilliant visual metaphor for this: an avalanche. A manipulator doesn't start by pushing a massive boulder down a mountain. No, they start at the very top, getting one tiny, barely noticeable yes. And that little rock hits another and another, until, boom, it builds into a devastating, unstoppable cascade of control.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the mind control process. Let's actually look at how this avalanche builds. Psychologists studying mind control across marketing, toxic relationships, and networking have identified a very specific playbook. The attacker's ultimate goal is essentially to clone themselves, to overwrite your identity so you think exactly like them. And they pull this off in 4 distinct steps: understanding the target, unfreezing, reprogramming, and freezing. Step 1 is all about understanding the target. So before an attacker makes a real move, they'll form this fake bond of friendship just to get you to lower your social defenses. Once you trust them, they start scanning. They are looking for physical clues to see if you're vulnerable. Maybe they notice excess blinking, which kind of points to anxiety, or folded arms, indicating insecurity. They're basically probing your emotional stability to find the exact entry point where their manipulation will hit the hardest. Once they've found that crack, they move straight to Step 2, unfreezing. We all have core principles, right? Things instilled in us since childhood. Manipulators know that if they can threaten those beliefs during a crisis, we undergo what's called unfreezing. The source text shares this really striking story about a teenager named Sam. He was a devout Christian, totally believed his faith could solve any problem. But when his mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer and prayers didn't heal her, the trauma caused his lifelong beliefs to completely unfreeze. And that is exactly the kind of vulnerability a manipulator waits for, to step in and offer their own twisted comfort.
Okay, so with the target's defenses completely down, the attacker initiates Step 3, reprogramming. This is where they basically install their own malicious operating system into the victim's mind. And the key tactic here, extreme isolation. You see this vividly in cults or violent relationships. The attacker cuts the victim off from the outside world, making their family and friends look insignificant or even dangerous. Why? Because an isolated, weakened person will instinctively turn to the very person controlling them for protection. It's wild.
Finally, we reach Step 4, freezing. The manipulator has to cement these newly implanted beliefs so they don't just fade away. They do this through a really strict system of reward and punishment. Honestly, it's a lot like dog training. Obey and you get rewarded. Disobey and you're punished. Eventually, this completely freezes the new pseudo-personality into place. And the truly terrifying part? Once frozen, the victim often becomes an active agent for the manipulator, going out to recruit or victimize other people without even realizing it.
Let's shift gears to Section 3, hypnotic language patterns.
So how exactly are they slipping these ideas into our heads? Look, words only make up about 7% of our communication, but manipulators use incredibly precise embedded commands to totally bypass your critical brain. Take the phrase, most people. If a salesperson says, well, most people in your situation choose this, your subconscious immediately panics. As humans, we have this deep psychological insecurity about being isolated. We desperately want to belong to most people. Or consider the classic feel, felt, found method to completely fabricate deep empathy. Then there's this incredibly subtle auditory trick, saying the words by now, as in, by now you must be ready to decide, which your subconscious literally hears as the command, by now.
And then, oh man, there is the illusion of choice. This is an assumptive question. Something like, would you rather sign the contract on Tuesday or Thursday? The manipulator is already assuming you're signing, but by handing you two distinct options, they give you this false sense of free will. When you confidently pick Thursday, you feel totally in control, completely unaware that the outcome was predetermined by the person pulling the strings.
All right, let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the roots of Machiavellianism. Now you might be thinking these dark tactics are just some modern invention of slick marketers or toxic partners, but actually, this dark psychology descends from a political playbook written over 500 years ago. Enter Machiavellianism. Named after the Renaissance diplomat Niccolo Machiavelli, his famous treatise, The Prince, was so controversial it was literally banned by the Catholic Church. Machiavellianism is basically an approach to politics that bluntly states the stability and survival of the state must come before any ethical or moral concerns. It advises leaders that keeping power often requires cunning, fraud, treachery, and, the use of fear to control subjects.
Machiavelli introduced a highly original concept he called virtù. And no, that isn't virtue in the traditional moral sense. Actually, scratch that. It's the total opposite. Machiavelli explicitly rejected classical Christian thought, which celebrated humility, arguing that those beliefs just made leaders weak. Instead, his concept of virtù encompasses absolutely any quality, whether it's extreme generosity or ruthless violence, that helps a ruler maintain their state in the present moment. It is literally the philosophy of the necessary evil. Which leads us to one of the most iconic quotes from The Prince, and it perfectly bridges classical politics with the dark psychology we were just talking about. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must be the fox to avoid the snares and a lion to overwhelm the wolves. It's the ultimate dual nature of manipulation. The fox represents the cunning, the hypnotic language, the hidden agendas. The lion represents the overwhelming force, the extreme isolation, the strict punishment. Sound familiar? It's the exact same playbook.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, recognizing the puppet strings.
Because going through this explainer isn't just about understanding the darkness, right? It's about giving you the tools to defend your own mental autonomy. Once you see the strings, they are so much harder to pull. So moving forward, actively try to spot embedded commands like most people. Notice artificial deadlines created just to make you panic. If you feel someone is trying to isolate you from different perspectives, question it immediately. And always identify when you're being handed a forced choice disguised as free will.
Understanding this attacker's playbook is absolutely your ultimate shield, whether you're dealing with a sleazy salesman, an overly controlling acquaintance, or a modern Machiavellian politician. So I'm going to leave you with this one provocative thought to carry into the rest of your day. Take a real close look at your inbox, your social media feeds, your next conversation, and ask yourself, who is trying to pull your strings today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and stay focused out there.